All right, so welcome everybody, and great that you are here in one of the last sessions of the workshop. So I hope the workshop has been going well for you. We're going to talk in this session about the introduction, giving you an introduction to the project summary and also to the overview to your project descriptions. So I am Linda, and I am the Associate Director of Proposal Development at the Advanced Science Research Center at the City University of New York. And with me is Laurel Kuxhaus, who is at NSF and the Program Director in Biomechanics and Mechanobiology and the CMMI division. So broadly, the project summary is a one-page document. It is required by NSF, and it is separate from the project description, which is allowed to be up to 15 pages for a career. And the project summary has very defined sections and information that has to be included. The overview is the introductory pages, 1 to 2 pages of the project description. And this overview gives reviewers basically what it says, an overview of what you will be talking about in the project description. And they're used in different ways. So program directors will use the project summary to help determine the program fit and the type of reviewers that are needed. And then reviewers will use the summary and the overview as well to learn the key objectives of the proposal and the expected significance of the research. So they each have a different purpose, and there are different writing strategies. Also, keep in mind that some reviewers might only read one of those sections, or they might read only those sections. So for example, when proposals go to a panel, not all panel members read all proposals closely. Sometimes they will read only these 2 sections. So there's goals for each one, and for both, there are opportunities to get reviewers both excited about the proposed research and integration of research and education, and also you can generate confidence in you as a researcher and educator, because if they're not confident in your ability to do the project, then your funding chances are way down. So both ideas and the writing do matter. And I like to talk about the 4 C's of a proposal, things that you should pay attention to as you're writing all sections. One is clarity. So the scientific and technical aspects need to be crystal clear. Coherence is really important. There's got to be an easy to follow logic to your proposal, both what you're proposing and how you have structured the proposal and the project description specifically. The ideas have to be compelling. And then the project has to be complete. Missing sections will potentially get you returned without review. Everything that is expected to be in the proposal should be there. So here's a little bit of a clarification about what these things look like. So the project summary will have a brief overview, say 2, possibly 1 to 3 paragraphs and I'll say what those are in a little bit. It also has a section on intellectual merit and a section on broader impacts. This must be in your project summary. The overview to the project description is different. There is no defined information that is required, and there's no required order here. It is up to you and what serves the project very well. But you do want to include this kind of information. What is the problem? Why should we care? What's the proposed solution? What's the potential impact? Why is the PI or team the best to do this? And what are the societal impacts? So when I talk about compelling, that refers to an exciting, important problem. And then coherent, that's the logical structure of the proposal and the ideas and limited jargon. And then clarity is, I want to be clear as the reviewer. I want to know what's being proposed. It's not a mystery novel. I don't want to wait until the end to find out what you're going to do. And then you should also be clear about what the broader impacts are and how they align with NSF's broader impacts criteria. And then it should also be clear as to how the research and education are actually integrated or synergistic for the career proposal. So more specifically, the project summary. So the first paragraphs, this overview, this text is taken right out of the NSF website. So what should be in this overview section of the project summary is a description of the activity that would result if the proposal were funded and a statement of objectives and methods to be employed. So you should state what is the research problem, why it's critical to solve, and what is the proposed solution. And for a career proposal, you could also describe the integration of research and education. What you do not need to include and should not include are a literature review or prior work. Those are past work. We want to know what's happening in, what would happen based on what you would do if you were funded. And then you need a heading that says intellectual merit. And this section would focus on how the research advances knowledge in the discipline or field. And you could also include the innovation, or, if there is an innovation, excuse me, you should state that. If you think that your research is going to transform the field, you can say that, but also explain how or why. And then you also need a section that says broader impacts, and this is about the benefits to society, and there are multiple levels that this may be a benefit. One, the research itself may be a benefit to society. It is not required that it does. There are some fields where it might be a stretch, but in engineering, most likely there is going to be a benefit to society. So you would state that. There are other benefits to society, and they may come out of the education activities or specific broader impacts, outreach activities, things like that. And the NSF does have you will list on its website or in the PAPG kinds of things that they're interested in. It is not an exclusive list, but some examples are, underrepresented groups benefiting from participating in the activities, a public outreach component that addresses NSF's mission in some fashion, but something that is probably not going to be a benefit to society without some additional features is simply having students in your lab or teaching courses. The results of those are really benefits to the student. So if you want to claim some sort of societal benefit, then that should also be in your plan and activity. This is a visual of the kinds of information that would go into the overview of the 15-page project description. So it is highly recommended that you start with a really captivating hook sentence and a statement of why this research is needed. And then tell us, the reviewers, what you propose to research. You can also include something about your career vision. So this proposal is a 5-year proposal, but it is also supposed to be a grounding to support your long-term career in both research and education. So you can talk about what that long-term vision is and how this proposal would help you get there. It's very helpful to state, if you have a hypothesis, to state it, and also state your objectives or questions, research questions, aims, whatever you're calling them, and helpful to put those into bullet points. You should briefly state your approach and expected outcomes, briefly outline your education plan, talk about the integration of research and education, and give some sense of the broader impacts of the project. So here's a few strategies for writing this. I recommend writing it in the first person, which is I or we. Scientists sometimes have difficulty getting out of the third person. But one thing about the first person is that it is an active voice, and an active voice generates more confidence, and it really is a more engaging way, read of a proposal. And then also, you want to provide an engaging overview of the entire proposal. If you don't generate reviewers' enthusiasm here, it's going to be really hard for them to become enthusiastic later on. Because in the early first few paragraphs, if they aren't excited about the problem and the solution, or don't see any kind of real need for it, then it may not even, they're not even going to read it very closely, probably. So you really do want to do all you can to get them excited about it. And you keep in mind that you're going to need your reviewers on your side to advocate for your proposal in the panel review. And so one way to do that, besides it being an exciting problem, is that the proposal is logical and easy to follow, and the narrative is compelling. It is recommended that you, but not required, that you have a graphic in the overview. You cannot have a graphic in the project summary, to clarify, but you're more than welcome to have a graphic in the project description, and the project description probably has many graphics. But the overview is a good place to provide a visualization of something that is crucial that reviewers understand early on. Say you're proposing a model, you may have a graphic of that model. If you have some sort of complex relationships you're talking about, putting those into a visual form may help readers understand it better. This overview will also function as a blueprint or kind of a map for the rest of the proposal. So however you lay things out in this overview, that organizational structure should follow through in the rest of the 15 pages. This is one way to ensure, help ensure that reviewers don't get confused. Again, include your objectives or aims, questions, hypotheses for both the research and your education plans. Put those right in the first page if you can, and bullet point them. That makes it easier for them to be found. If you embed them within a paragraph, they're easier to miss, and you do not want reviewers to miss them. Helpful to keep jargon to a minimum. And I also recommend that you don't simply copy and paste the project summary into the overview or overview into the project summary. One reason is that, remember, if some reviewers are reading only, if they only read those, then you've lost an opportunity to give them additional information. And they have different purposes, so it's better to not just copy and paste. So with first impressions, so a good story for an NSF proposal can help you. And keep in mind that the project summary and the overview do set the tone for reviewers, in terms of how excited they get about it, what they think about you as a PI, whether you seem to be clear in what you want to do, whether you seem to be qualified, also whether you seem to be excited about the project. And then, so there are things that make a narrative, a story compelling. One is that the problem itself is exciting and seems important, that the research addresses a critical need or a problem, and that there is a potentially transformative solution. Coherent, a good story is also coherent. And so it's readable by overworked reviewers and by non-experts sometimes. There's a logical structure and limited jargon. And then it's clear. It really is important that it is crystal clear what's being proposed. And that seems obvious, but I have read proposals where this is not true. As the reviewer, I don't want to have to figure out what's being proposed. It's also important that the broader impacts actually align with what NSF expects as broader impacts. They have certain things that they're interested in. Broader impacts aren't just anything, so you do need to line that up. And then there needs to be a strategy to integrate the research and education, and that should be clear as well. So you can use the overview or the project summary to discuss your ideas with program directors. So you would send one of these documents to the program director, no more than 1 to 2 pages. And your initial contact would be via email and ask to discuss your idea and its fit with the program. So when should you send this? So earlier is better than later. So if you wait too close to the deadline, they're going to be quite busy, and if they have time to pay attention, won't give you as much time as you may want. Also, say the idea doesn't really and seem to be a good fit with their program. Then if they say, no, it doesn't really fit here, but maybe it probably will fit better in this other program, then if you talk to the program officer early enough, then you have time to reframe your proposal to fit a different program, which can be really crucial. And so there's questions you can ask. For example, you can ask about how well your idea fits the priorities of the program. You can talk about budgets, particularly if you think you need more than the minimum budget for your education or research. And also it's a good opportunity to volunteer to serve on future panels for the program. So that's the big picture. So for the breakout groups, I'm going to put in the chat a link to this PDF, and it's a project summary, and it is an old one. I pulled it off the NSF website, so it's publicly available. And I would say that it is a credible but not perfect proposal. So if you analyze it, you can maybe pick out some of the things that are weaker, some things that are better about it. So look at how it's organized, because it's generally good. And then look at the different types of information in the 3 sections: the overview, intellectual merit, and broader impacts. You can think about the strengths or weaknesses of each section, and then post on your lovely Post-it notes questions about the project summary and the overview or intellectual merit, broader impacts, and then we will answer them when we come back as a full group. Okay? So I am going to stop the slideshow.
Okay, are you ready for breakouts?
Let me paste this in here. Oops. All right, so that's the PDF. Okay. All right, so we'll go into breakouts. I don't remember. I think we did like 15 to 20 minutes for the breakout.
It's up to you. What would you prefer?
Wasn't it like 15 to 20 minutes, Laurel?
Let's keep an eye on the pace of the questions. So the more questions, the faster we bring them back.
Okay.
And we'll aim for about a half an hour of questions if we can.
Okay. All right, so thank you for the questions. So we're gonna go back and forth and try and answer as many as we can. I'm gonna start with question number 77, which has multiple parts. So this first part, the passive voice in the summary takes away from the PI's agency and makes it harder to read. So the first thing is that the summary that I gave you is an older version. I mean, it's an old summary. I think it's from 2004. And in the past, NSF required that the project summary was written in the 3rd person. So that is one reason why that one is. Much more recently, in the last year or two, I'm pretty certain that NSF took out that requirement, because I don't actually see it listed anymore. But I think it's a good example of why writing your proposal itself in the 1st person is a good idea, because you do, then the PI has the agency in the project. It's much more direct, it's more active. So think about it that way. The last paragraph of the main text is repetitive with broader impacts. Use of space is unbalanced, tidy, intellectual merit and broader impacts, and a huge main text in comparison. And then redundancy and repetitiveness, waste of space when saying the intellectual merits of the proposed activity, etc. And so there was a couple of comments similar to this. So I think this gets to the idea of a couple of things come up when I think about this. One is that it is really important to have other people read your proposal, because they can help you identify things that are redundant, things that are hard to understand, things like that. Sometimes you do need some repetition in your proposal, but it depends, you've got to be careful what it is. So I agree that if you have a heading that says intellectual merit and the next sentence says the intellectual merits of this proposed activity are, then it's a waste of space, really, and it's redundant. Readers don't like to see redundancies, or repetitions. So it's more of a writing strategy than improper information, because a really well-written proposal will go a long way. If you have a weak idea, the fact that it's brilliantly written is not going to save a bad idea. But if you have a really great idea and it's poorly written, you actually may not get funded because reviewers can't figure out what it says, or it's so full of grammar mistakes that they don't want to figure out what it says, or it's poorly laid out, it's hard to read. So all of those things actually are important. And so then in terms of this use of space is unbalanced. I think how you use the space in the project summary is dependent on the proposal itself, like what is actually going on. There's certain amounts of information, like what are you planning to do? And, so you would also see in that summary that they didn't actually have bullet points for the objectives. I'm not even sure. I don't think they included specific objectives in there, but if you had bulleted points of objectives, that would take up some space, but it would also be very clear to read. In terms of balance between intellectual merit and broader impacts, a lot of people always have questions about that. And again, it kind of depends on the project itself. But then what makes things look unbalanced is if one section is really large and another section, is tiny. It also probably is going to be a little odd if the intellectual merit section is much shorter than the broader impacts. So, but there is no rigid rule about this. I don't know, do you want to say anything else, Laurel?
I think you took good care of that one. I'm going to grab question number 82 next, about do reviewers find it concerning when the PI does not use the full page available? For example, here and then that gets into the, part of the redundancy issue that Linda just addressed. So do the reviewers find it concerning if you don't use the whole page? They may find it concerning, they may find it disturbing, they may think it's weird, they may not be bothered by it. But I think it's reasonable to expect them to wonder, did the PI know they could use the whole page? Did they have nothing more to say about this? It's also good to know that, of course, when you draft your project summary, you're doing it in Word or equivalent, and you want to keep it to about a page. But I believe when it actually gets uploaded, it's actually a copy and paste into 3 text boxes. And I know from my experience as a PI that sometimes what I think is a page in my Word and how it actually spaces out once you put it in text boxes, sometimes there can be discrepancies. So if there's, if it's a little shorter than a page, that's okay. But definitely do a practice upload of that section first, because what you think is a page in Word may not actually be what happens after you upload it, after you copy and paste it into text boxes. Linda, do you have anything to add, or do you want to pick the next question?
No, I generally agree. Yeah, when they give you a maximum number of pages, or say it's 1 page, or for the project description, 15 pages, if it's significantly shorter, then it does leave open the question of, was there more to say as well? Maybe some important details could have been included. So a little shorter, I'd say, is probably good. You're fine, but too short, like if I saw a project summary that was half a page, I would be disturbed. Even though I might be tired of reading a lot of stuff, I would still be disturbed because I would think there's more information that should be there. What was I gonna? Oh, let's see. Let me talk about 81. Over the course of this workshop, we've been hearing about the importance of clarity, making a good first impression, etc. Everybody wants to write a perfect proposal, but that's unattainable. Probably true. And that review opinions can differ, as we saw in the mock panel, also true. Seems important to simulate a review panel and get feedback on your proposal as early as often as possible. Would I agree? Yes. Yeah, I think it really is important to have other people read your proposal. If you can have somebody read early, drafts, because there's different things you want to be clear on. One is that what you're actually proposing is clear, that other people understand what you're saying. And basically, similar to a review, if you have them tell you back what they think you're proposing, you can get a sense of whether what people are reading are what you intend for them to understand, because that's not always true. And your final drafts, it is important also to have other people read it. And because it really, because the problem of reading your own work is that it's in your head, so you know what it says, but what you know it says may not actually be what it says. That's the underlying issue. So yes, and general strategies, I mean, it actually can be helpful, even if your university doesn't offer this, if you can put together a writing group with other people working on proposals. You can read each other's proposals, give each other feedback. You want to say anything else, Laurel?
I think that's good. I'm going to grab question number 83 next. What are your thoughts on the education component, specifically suggesting writing a book? This sounded good to us. So I think, for the education component of career proposals, it should be something that's suited to you, something that you would like to do, because, oh gosh, if this proposal gets funded, that's 5 years of you having to do the work. So, pick something that you can see yourself doing. Writing a book is, certainly one education component. I've seen a lot of proposals where writing a book is also, part of an outreach or broader impacts component, like if it's a coloring book about science or, a children's book about blood vessels. I think any of those are okay. It's your chance to be creative. If you've got experience that would help prepare you to do this, of course, that's like having preliminary data. So it's good to show that as well. Linda, do you have anything to add?
No, I think I'm gonna just sort of tack on question 79. Did the reviewers find the education activities were too ambitious? So we can't answer that because we don't know what those reviews were. All we know is that this project was funded because it's on the NSF website. But I think the other thing to keep in mind is that people are at different types of institutions as well. And so the connection between research and education may be different at an R1 institution versus someone applying from, say, a community college, because the expectations are different, the environment is different. So there is no one answer. But I think this is a place where getting some additional advice may be helpful, like talk to your department chair about the scope of the education activities, because they also should align with your department's needs and students, and also that department letter of support also has to be supportive of what you're doing. So there is no right or wrong answer here. That's what I would say about that. I was thinking of, there's actually a lot of comments about the summary itself. So maybe we just look at that, which I think will sort of address a lot of the questions and comments here. If I can remember, if I can find it on my screen, I'll share it again. No, that's the wrong thing. There it is. All right, so let's look at this project summary. There's lots of interesting comments here about the balance of things, the kinds of information, overlaps. So overall, this summary in general is pretty good. The 3 paragraphs may be a little bit long, but you know, it is talking about what is the problem and opportunity here. It does tell us here in this sentence what this proposal is about, which is excellent. And then here it does tell us what is going to be done. And then here it's a career proposal, so it is laying out what the educational activities are. And we don't talk about the details of what they are. I think the most important sections to look at here are the intellectual merit. So here, because the intellectual merit, remember, is supposed to pretty explicitly tell us, the reviewers, what is the new knowledge, or how does this research advance the field? Something, you know, are there innovations? Those are the kinds of things we want to know here. So this sentence says it responds to current needs in design, analysis, and prediction of these plumes with advanced investigative methods. But it's all kind of vague. It's not really telling us what the new knowledge would be, what that advance would be, or how these innovative new methods. It's a little too vague. This person could have been much more explicit about what the intellectual merit is. Here it's a little clearer that the measurements will provide fundamental insight into the turbulent properties of multi-phase plumes. Could be probably a little more information there about how that advances the field, rather than mostly focused on knowing more specifically about these plumes. And then here, there is a bit about the education activities. And so, yes, keep in mind that your education activities might have intellectual merit. It's not always true, but if what you would be doing would contribute some new understandings of how to engage students in STEM, new methods of teaching or explaining information, complex information, those might be an intellectual merit. Here, it's a little vague. All we know here is that there's going to be curriculum development and using visualizations and animation to communicate complex topics, and they're going to be investigated. That's more of what's going to happen. It's not an intellectual merit the way it's framed. In terms of broader impacts, this is also, I'd say, on the vague side, right? So they're going to provide important resources for learning, understanding, and advancing environmental fluid mechanics. But how is that a benefit to society? So what kinds of information would make it clear that this might be a benefit to society? So we can think about that. For example, like, who are those resources going to be for? Who's going to use them? And why but and even more specifically, why, what about environmental fluid mechanics might be of benefit to society? Is it going to lead to some kind of new technologies that help solve some critical societal problems? These things we don't know, but perhaps could have been developed in this section. There's going to be this website that gives access to laboratory data. So that's great, but that's more of a dissemination thing. It's not necessarily a broader impact. Who is it giving access to and why? And then the course textbook, which everybody has noted, it emphasizes outreach to a broad audience, but who is that audience? So is it third graders? Is it graduate students? And how is that a broader impact to society and not a benefit to the students themselves? So more clarification on that. And then the exchange program with Germany, that actually does state a benefit to society in promoting cross-cultural communication and understanding. But here we would also want to know how that exchange program connects back to the research. So how is that integrated in the overall plan? I don't know, do you want to add anything to my analysis of that?
I think you tackled a lot of things that showed up in the comments and questions. I'm going to grab number 90 next. There's a great observation that this example did not include a clear statement about the integration of research and education. What do you think? And I'll say my answer to that, like my answer to so many things, is if you want the reviewers to know something, you should tell them. So if you want them to know what you see as the strengths of the integration of research and education, and as we've talked a lot in a lot of other places at this workshop about the fact that the word reciprocal has shown up in the solicitation this year, which is something that's kind of different from the past. If you want them to know what you think is the reciprocal value in the integration of research and education, you should tell the reviewers that. So if you want to put a little bit in your project summary about that, that's great, because then they know what you think it is. Then they can decide if they agree with you or disagree. If you want them to guess what they think the integration of research and education is, they might guess, and their guess might be the same as what you intend, but it might not be. So I think it's always better to just tell the reviewers what you want them to know. Anything to add on that one, Linda?
Yeah, I mean, I would expand that to your entire proposal. Along with don't confuse the reviewers, don't leave it to them to interpret what you're trying to get across, because people will interpret things in different ways. All you have to do is read the newspaper, and there's many interpretations about everything, right? So if your job is to write it in a way that people will understand it the way you intend it. And it can take a number of iterations to get it to that point. So let's see. What else should we talk about? There's a early question about not simply copy pasting the project summary into the overview. Is it fine to do that? There's no rule that says you can't do that. This idea of rewriting or reorganizing points can make it hard for reviewers to read. So it is possible to say, talk about the same information in a way, write it, use different words, but not be confusing. You should always be talking about the same thing. It's that, in a sense, I mean, there might be, you could actually take some, like if you have like a couple of fabulous sentences, you can use those. Again, your broader impact statement, if it's really terrific in the project summary, maybe you use that. But to just take the entire section and plop it back into the overview is just restating the same information, and also it does kind of look lazy. So, I want to know that you're ambitious if you're going to get a career award. There was one other thing I was going to say. Oh, one place where you always want to use exactly the same language is when you state your objectives or hypotheses, whatever they are, whatever you're stating up front, always use the same language throughout the proposal. Don't change a word of it, because that's a place where reviewers can easily get confused. And if you turn your objective inside out later in the project description, then I as a reviewer is like, I thought they were doing X, but now this is X.2 or Y. And then I have to go back and look at it again and figure it out. And once reviewers start having to go back and forth in your proposal to figure out what's going on, you're kind of losing them, because you're confusing them. And being, a confusing proposal is less likely to be a funded proposal. Do you want to add anything else, Laurel? No. Yeah.
I think you get the next pick of questions, and this will probably be our last one before we have to adjourn.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe we just talk about jargon. Everybody's always interested in jargon. What constitutes jargon depends. When it's going to a panel, the panel in engineering will be, somewhat narrowly focused, but within that narrow focus, there's going to be people with different types of expertise more specifically. And the key thing is you do want people to understand your proposal. So it is, in general, a good strategy to use less jargon. It makes it clearer. How much technical jargon? Sometimes you have to use certain words, right? But it's also a common misunderstanding that using lots of jargon makes you seem smarter. That is not necessarily true, right? It's one reason why in an ideal world, it might be better to have a senior faculty member teach introductory courses, because they have used the material so much, they can actually talk about it in simpler terms. Whereas if you have a graduate student teach an introductory course, they're going to use the language that they're reading in all these technical papers, because they haven't synthesized it themselves, So less jargon is always better, but how much, you kind of have to assess what's needed and what you can explain in clearer language. Do you want to expound on jargon a little bit more?
Other than, I'll just, quickly address this last question I see that came in that says, is it good practice to avoid using acronyms? Should we just write without them completely? And I'd say this is one of those things where it kind of depends on what is standard in your subfield. If everyone uses the same standard acronyms, those are totally cool to use. And of course, you should define them the first time so that people know that you know what they mean. If you find yourself making up a lot of acronyms because you think it's going to make your proposal that's 3 pages too long be just the right length, if you just reduce it to all acronyms, then that's probably too many.
Yeah.
Oh, and we're right at 3:30, so I bet Zach is gonna dissolve us soon.